الحمد لله مصرف الأوقات والدهور ومجدد الأيام والأعوام والشهور الذي خلق الموت والحياة ليبلوكم أيكم أحسن عملا وهو العزيز الغفور أحمده وأشكره وهو المحمود المشكور وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له الذي خلق السماوات والأرض وجعل الظلمات والنور وأشهد أن سيدنا محمدًا عبده ورسوله الشفيع المشفع يوم العرض والنشور اللهم صل وسلم على عبدك ورسولك محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه القائمين بامتثال المأمور واجتناب المحظور أما بعد. I say greetings to those who are listening in the language of our exile. I address the group that is often referred to with various titles, but we tend to know of as the Bidun or the Arab al-Rasif, the pavement Arabs, or the Arabs of the sidewalk. It is these people that I address as one of their populace. We are the result of decisions made by our parents or grandparents in which we left what were our domiciled lands where we had dwelled for the better part of 2 millennia. During this time, our parents or grandparents, overwhelmed by the ideological battles happening in their native lands, decided to march out in some numbers and to look for a better option, somewhere free of the warring and ideology that plagued our lands some 50 years ago or more. All of these ideologies that plagued our lands some 50 years or more, that led to our exile, were connected with a wider phenomenon that was accelerating. Namely, that man became the God of this age. And by becoming the God of this age, his own bestial desires and flimsy lusts were put over and exalted high above that which our Lord had revealed. Our parents or grandparents of august memory, al-marhum, sought to safeguard themselves and their progeny from this cataclysm. The unfortunate issue is, as they fled from location to location, from the eastern rump of Africa and the Middle East all the way to the Horn and the ending of the West, they found little more than the same godlessness and glorification of man's own achievements. This led to them going further afield. As they went further afield, they found themselves in a new reality. Far from home, far from the world that they knew. And with children or grandchildren, whichever way the progeny are, having to be safeguarded. But instead of finding a place for respite for the time being, they found a new and more brazen challenge than that which had plagued their own lands. They found not just a godlessness, not just a wickedness and the glorification of man's own achievements. They also found that this form of idolatry, this form of glorification of man, was also a missionary form of idolatry, in which they were now being called, not just being told to accept the outrageous and godless claims, but now they were being called and told that it is better to be wicked. It is righteousness to be wicked, and that there is no sin or evil, and that people are free to choose their own way. Well, these august marhoom parents and grandparents had in many ways already been immunized from this wickedness. This was indeed the reason why they set out and left some of their locations. So they were immunized. The problem that they did not know they would have to face is that their progeny would be forced to encounter this wickedness head on, not during their adult years where they were at the peak and strength and apex of their intellectual and physical powers, but during their most formative years, in which they are most impressionable. It was at this point that the Arab al-Rasif, the pavement or sidewalk Arabs, were created. These pavement or sidewalk Arabs, in their most impressionable years, were bombarded with all matter of wickedness and filth imaginable. Their august parents and grandparents could do what they could, but what they could not do is fight that battle for them. These youth had to fight their own battle. And the battle was on two fronts. The first were those among these pavement Arabs that sought to amalgamate as much of the culture as possible so as to avoid detection and to meet the widest form of acceptance as possible. But in doing so, in trimming the branches of the tree, inadvertently, they also wound up at times scuffing, denting, and chipping the trunk that their august parents and grandparents had sought to preserve in the very hijrah that they had made from their lands. And so the first tribulation happened. The second way of dealing with the situation is that some of these pavement Arabs were driven angry with rage at what they saw, the stories that they were told of their august parents and grandparents, al-marhumun, and they suffered. They realized that they were not part and parcel of the society that they were in, but there was also a growing gulf forming between that which their august parents or grandparents had established and themselves that were living in a new land that was hostile to revelation. Many of these went towards a more radical direction. Both the first and second categories were radical or made radical. And then there began a different process, a process in which these people, these progeny, began to become apolitical and sometimes a-religious. They knew that something was wrong. They knew that something was happening to them that had not happened to anyone of their ancestors before, but they were unable to communicate in words that which they were suffering. As they burrowed further or were told to dig further into a new locale in which popular culture, in the forms of music, arts, and entertainment, glorified man and shook its fist at the sky, daring for punishment to be sent down, these people had no choice but to fight the best way they knew how. Some fell by the wayside, while others grabbed leaves, branches, and other things from the tree of Islam that they were able to salvage. But they faced a difficult threat. Here they were attempting to fight against numerous weapons, seemingly unending funding, and an enemy of prowess that was only bested by the shaitan himself. And they were ill-equipped spiritually and physically for such a battle. This occurred from their formative years into their adult years. But in their adult years, they stumbled across the treasure trove of that which their parents had sought to preserve when they left the lands that they had inhabited for the best part of 2 millennia. But they faced a problem. This treasure trove, this chest that they could smell the aroma and fragrance of Islam from, the Islam that they had been told of by their parents and grandparents. They were distant from it. They were distant. And because they were distant from it, all they could do was put their eyes up to the keyhole of this box and look inside and see the treasure and smell the aroma. They did not have the keys to this box. They did not have the keys to open the treasure chest. Because in the course of their being thrown on the sidewalk in these new lands, in the course of their having to learn the language of their exile, they had to neglect the language of revelation and the language of their people in the course of acclimating to their new environment. With that being the case and that being the key to this treasure trove, they did not have the keys to get inside of this box, and nor did they know any locksmith that had the missing set. And so they were locked out of this box. And as they were wrestling and looking through the keyhole and smelling the aroma, their enemies showed them no mercy. They came forward full thrust with ideas such as secularism, ecumenism, religious indifferentism, and all forms of wickedness designed to separate a man from his most essential essence, that he has a creator, that he is creation, and that he must stand before that creator on a cosmic day of resurrection that is without doubt. And so, what would they do with this box that they could not get open? Well, they looked to and fro to different people. They looked to the entertainers and the magicians and all matter of filth that said they had the keys to the box and that they would open it in due time. But they were unable. They did not have the keys. Still another category who's fancied themselves religious leaders. They also did not have the keys to this box. But because they wore the cloak of Islam and hid behind the jalabiyya and the imamah, it gave the appearance that these most likely have the keys. But little did they know that these men, perpetrating a grievous fraud, themselves were economists, civil engineers, Jesuits that went to exclusive schools back east. That their main claim to fame and their reason for having knowledge of Islam is that they had gone to the very institutions that had made these two categories of pavement Arabs. They did not have the keys. And this is what has plagued the pavement Arabs. This is what has plagued them, with some of them saying, this mountain is too tall to climb. There are no keys to this treasure chest. There is no way to get inside, and they gave up on Islam. Others contented themselves with taking in the aroma from whatever they could. So they preserved the salah, but not the hijab, not the hajj, not the ahkam al-shari'iyah. They preserved the hijab, but not the salah. They picked what they could from what they could see through the keyhole in the box that they did not have the keys to. This exile, in the language of this exile that I speak, for some of us of the pavement, some of us only know the language of the exile. Because absent-mindedly we were told by our parents or grandparents to only learn the language of the exile because they don't want them to have an accent in school and struggle and have to go through the humiliation of taking second language classes. So they were goaded, incited, and admonished about speaking the tongue of their people and goaded to speak the language of their exile. So for them, they're only able to look inside of the box and smell its aroma and appreciate its treasures, but they cannot access it. So then the question comes, what do we do? Because some of these pavement Arabs, some of whom were also Bidun people, which are included with the pavement Arabs, they as well were thrown on the pavement. The Bidun Arab people are strewn throughout the world and have tried to answer the call of Islam in many different ways. Some catastrophic, some tragic, but then some of it has been admirable. To my fellow Pavement Arabs in the exile, if those who brought you, the marhoom that brought you into exile, if they are no longer alive, then you will have to access others who can introduce you back to that which made you who you were. If they are still alive and you struggle with the language of your people, you must make time for your august people before you, your parents or your grandparents. You must, even if you must beg or plead, to ask them if they have the key to that box. If they can unlock that box so that you can be introduced to that treasure. And with that treasure is an entire galaxy of august personalities. From then up until today, that can show you how to truly benefit from that treasure. I tell you, brothers and sisters, that the condition that you are in right now is not the condition that you sought and not a condition that you deserve. It is only if you wallow in that condition that you must stay like this. This is not your end if you don't choose it to be. But you must act rightly and understand that the language of your exile is not all of who you are, the substance of who you are, or the quintessence of who you could be. It is only a portion, a tool of what you must know in order to move around where it is that you are. But as you should know, it is not the key to the treasure that you seek. So I call out to you and all the rest, as far as can hear my voice or will share the words that I say today, that I call the Ikhwa al-Arab of the Rasif, of the sidewalk, who have been thrown into this confusion, driven insane by the righteousness that their parents and grandparents showed them, and then the conformity that they must show in a society wallowing in sin and degradation. They've been driven insane by this. I call you to that which is better for you. If you were distant, come close. If you had apostated, come back. If you were confused, you can become unconfused. I call you as one of your own, and amongst one of your own, and the son of one of your own, in the language of our exile. Wassalamu alaikum.